Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hopefully, everyone is doing well. My name is John Elston, and on behalf of the UC Irvine Black Alumni Chapter, I want to say thank you for joining us today. This is a third webinar in the series entitled Health and Wellness, a Black Perspective. Our subject matter today, breaking the stigma about mental health. For those of you that have not attended one of our previous webinars, a brief background on health and wellness, a Black perspective. This derives from the longtime philosophy in our communities, each generation is supposed to get better. It is our hope and our intent to share information relevant to our communities with any and everyone that wants to improve their health and wellness. These webinars are completely free and they're open to all. So please encourage others to attend as well as share this information with your friends and family in your network. These webinars are taught by UC Irvine Black Alumni. A little bit about the Black Alumni. All of our speakers and panelists have graciously volunteered their time and expertise to give back to the community. These alumni represent some of the top professionals in their respective fields. They are extremely knowledgeable in their field and what they have learned in the hope of, and they are teaching what they have learned in the hope of helping others. Our previous webinars included the topics COVID-19 and educating our children. And if we get a chance, we'll post those links in the chat this morning. This is the last webinar for 2021. So on behalf of all UC Irvine Black alumni, I want to wish you and yours a very happy holiday season. Be well and be safe. We're starting again in January 2022 with financial literacy and home ownership. Additional webinars already planned in early 2022 include dental care, healthcare for Black folks, nutrition and exercise, and estate planning, to mention but a few topics. Again, these webinars are free and they're open to everyone, so we encourage you to come back and please invite others to attend. Today's topic under Health and Wellness, a Black Perspective, is breaking the stigma about mental health. So before we begin and you get to meet our esteemed panelists, I want to say thanks to all the folks that made this possible. The UC Irvine Alumni Association for your continued support. The UC Irvine Black Alumni Chapter Board, which represents, as we say, everything from typewriters, peachy folders, and 8-tracks to Google Docs, Stay Woke, and Instagram. So we cover a wide range of eras. And last but not least, to our panelists today, thank you for your time and commitment. You are truly appreciated. So before I finish, I want to introduce the two talented women who, along with myself, comprise the trio that makes this event happen today. The first one represents UCI class of 2004. She is a bachelor's in sociology and an MBA. She is a marketing professional and she is our host for the day. Please welcome Ms. Sandra Rosenfeld. The second alum represents UC Irvine class of 1995. She has a BA in political science and a master's in public administration. She is an associate director of facilities and she will be giving you all the logistics. Please join me in welcome Ms. Arnesia Bryant. Arnesia.
Thank you. So for today, we will have a panel. The panel will be a discussion and a little different style than what we have done in the past, but more appropriate for this particular seminar. We ask that you keep yourselves muted while in this session. Please place all questions that you have for the panelists in the chat. I will be looking at the chat to ensure that the questions get answered, and our host for today will also be working to ensure that those questions get answered. There will be an opportunity drawing at the end that we will place your names for those who are present inside of a wheel, and that will allow us to draw out 3 names for a gift prize of $25 for each person to Amazon. So please pay attention and please make sure that you're able to answer questions that may come up as we ask them, or that you're here until the end so that you can be part of the opportunity drawing. With that being said and done, I would also like to pass this back to John so that he can introduce your host for today.
Okay, and again, our host for today is a very talented young lady. She comprises a trio that makes this happen. And so please join me in welcome Miss Sandra Rosenfeld. Sandra.
Hi, and thank you for the warm welcome, and thank you to you all for joining us today. We know you could be anywhere else, but you are joining us here for this very important conversation. And our hope is that you take away some learnings and take away not only learnings, but be able to apply that to your life or share that with your colleagues, your friends, and your loved ones. So with that said, before we continue any further, what I would like to do is read a disclaimer to you. Um, so with that said, the information presented in today's event is provided for general information purposes only and does not constitute legal or other professional advice on any subject matter. UCI Alumni Association, the Black Alumni Chapter, and our webinar panelists do not accept any responsibility for any loss which may arise from reliance on information presented in today's event. Some of the links shared during this webinar may lead to websites operated and maintained by third parties. We are providing these links solely as a convenience, and the presence of such links do not imply any responsibility for the linked site or an endorsement of the linked site, its operator, or its contents. So to sum that up, this is all just for us to provide you the information you need so you can continue to learn and do your own research and determine what information will be most useful to you as you carry on with yourself. So without further ado, as we think about breaking the stigmas about mental health, taking a step back and just thinking about how when we're dealing with life's challenges, we all have to find positive ways to cope with stress and sometimes take steps to heal our minds. And that directly relates to mental health. So with that, our mental health is just as important as our physical health. However, as we all know, sometimes we don't all treat that the same. So one stat I will share with you is that according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 4 people will struggle with mental illness at some point during their lives. In the African American community, mental health issues are often compounded by psychological stress of systemic racism. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, they reported that African American adults are 20% more likely to report serious psychological distress than compared to the general population. What's more, seeking mental health care is stigmatized within the many Black communities. 1 in 3 African Americans who struggle with mental health issues will receive appropriate treatment. So meaning that the rest of that population, the rest of the group will not receive treatment at some point in their lives. And that's just due to the reluctance to seek out this type of care, mental health care that is. And that is attributed to a general distrust of the medical establishment. And for many of us, as we know, historically, this distrust comes from the misdiagnosis that comes at a higher rate compared to other populations, in the name of medical advancement. And sometimes, in some cases, there has been exploitation by the government. But at the same time, seeking mental health care is often viewed as a weakness by many African Americans, running counter to the survivalist mentality born from systemic oppression and chronic racism. So destigmatizing mental health care within the Black community is going to require a shift of harmful narratives in the media and removing systemic hurdles to access. So with that, as we've seen over, especially within the last few years, we've noticed how a lot of celebrities have used their platform, used their fame to really talk about mental health. and just really showing how that from their own experiences, how we should be more comfortable in talking about this and seeking out the appropriate care. So as you all can see on the screen, I'm sharing just a few of many celebrities that have stepped up to that. So as you can see, Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, they took a break from their respective sports in the middle of their competitive seasons to care for their mental health. And you'll also see on the screen a picture of Brandon Marshall, 13-year NFL career, 6-time Pro Bowler. He was very vocal in sharing about his diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And he has now become an outspoken mental health advocate in sports. And he is actually in the process of developing a show to continue that conversation about mental health care within the sports world. You have Jay-Z, who's been very vocal about advocating for mental health resources in public schools. So that way children learn how to navigate that and how to be able to learn the language to speak to the type of support they need when it comes to their mental health. And you have Charlamagne tha God, the radio host, who has been very vocal about people seeking out therapy when necessary. And last, but certainly not least, we have Taraji P. Henson, who testified before Congress in 2019 about the need for mental health counselors in the Black community. And she has used that time during her speech, during her testimony, to share that she not only is suffering from depression and anxiety, but also shared that she wants to use her fame, use her celebrity to really push the narrative, to really bring positive awareness to mental health care. So as I said, these are just a few of the celebrities that have used their platforms to really push the conversation towards a positive view about mental health care. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to our distinguished panel, who's going to help us continue that conversation about mental health care, and not only help us define it, understand what are the facts when it comes to mental health care, but then also just figuring out what are some of the ways that we can not only help ourselves, but help our loved ones, and we can live happy and healthy lives. So without further ado, we have our distinguished panel, and I will briefly introduce them. While I'm doing that, I encourage you to click on one of the links that was shared earlier within the chat that shows some of their accomplishments, their achievements, their professional background. I encourage you to read their bios because we won't be reading that during this presentation, but I encourage you to read that as I make these introductions. So we have Lori Brody joining us from the Loma Linda Veterans Affairs. We also have Robert Brody from Patton State Hospital. We have Courtney Hughes, who works in counseling and psych services from Cal State Sacramento. We also have Bedford Palmer II, a tenured associate professor from St. Mary's College. And last but certainly not least, we have Tracy Shaw. We're gonna get right into it. So I shared some of the stats around mental health care, around mental illness, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page, we're all on the same, have the same thinking, I want to turn it over first to Courtney. Courtney, can you just share with us, just to make sure we're all on the same page, how would you define mental health? What is that?
Yes, thank you. And first to say welcome to everyone. It's great to see everybody. I'm so glad to be here, but I was thinking about this question and I will try to make it as succinct as possible, knowing that a lot of the questions, that we'll answer today will kind of cover this as well. But in general, when I think of mental health, right, you mentioned it earlier, Sandra, in terms of like the health of our mind, right? And how we, it impacts how we think, how we feel, how we relate with other people, right? I think if you kind of look it up online, it says, it's composed of our psychological, right, and our emotional, well-being. So again, how we're thinking, how we're feeling, it can impact the way that we deal with stress, of course. And I sometimes like to go a little further in that I really kind of look at people Very holistically, right? And so when I think of mental health, I'm not only just looking at like the psychological and emotional part, but I'm really looking at how, you know, physical health impacts mental health, right? How um, financial well-being, right, impacts someone's mental health, right? All of these different aspects of the person, spiritual, community, right, their environment. And so I think mental health is impacted, right, by so many different things, and affected, right, by so many different things that can be, you know, kind of impacting the person. And so personally for me, I look at it, yeah, very holistically, and I'm always looking at like the interconnecting parts, right? And so I encourage y'all to do that as well, right? As you're kind of thinking of, oh, I don't know, like what's my mood today? How am I feeling? What's my mental health? Really looking at these other areas, right, as well. Um, the last thing I'll say about it is that I think you have to be really intentional about caring for it, right? And um, you know, being aware, right? Checking in with ourselves and like really doing things to nurture, right? Like your mental health. So I think the intentionality is really, really, really important when we're talking about mental health as well.
Thanks for that. I think that was really helpful to hear how, when it comes to mental health, it, when you're having sort of the different experiences that affect your mental health, it can come from different areas within your life. So it's very important that you are intentional and that you're conscious of that. So with that said, I want to turn it over to Lori. So Lori, so based on what I'm hearing from Courtney, does this mean that when it comes to mental health, that I would only need to seek out therapy if something's wrong, or does this mean I'm crazy if something's going on with me? Like how would you answer that?
Right, good question. A lot of individuals, especially from the African American community, get concerned about, well, what does this mean about me?
Mhm.
I think it's great that the statistics you shared earlier talked about how common and how normal it is to experience some depression, some anxiety um, in your life at some point or another. Even you may even just seek counseling for everyday issues. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're extremely, depressed or extremely anxious. Another thing that was mentioned is that within the African American community, we have a additional set of stressors that I think will make that 1 in 4 statistic a little bit higher for us.
Mhm.
As African American women, we have unique struggles. For African American men, they have their own set of struggles. And then for our children, they also have a set of struggles that is very unique to the general population, but also increases the level of stress and distress that we experience. So I think the point about normalizing the need for mental health is very important. Normalizing the fact that, uh, you or a friend or a family member is likely going to need some mental health treatment at some point in their life.
Thank you for that. That's helpful to know. And in just thinking about, okay, so I heard from Courtney, heard from Lori, and you're saying that, hey, you're pretty much saying it's okay to think about your mental health, and it's becoming more acceptable to talk about it. So now that I know that, okay, you're not crazy if you're talking about it or you're concerned about it. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong with you or that you're sick, but it's just more of just being conscious that you may need to just talk to someone to think things through. So that's good to know. And so I'll turn it over to Robert. So Robert, so I'll be honest with you, for some folks, when it comes to therapy, they may be thinking, okay, you're saying I should go to a therapist, but I don't feel comfortable telling the therapist all my business, right? Why should I go to them when I can just talk to my soror, right? Or when I can just talk to my pastor, my bishop, or my faith leader, or you know what, I can just talk to my parents. Like, why would I do that? Why would I go to a therapist when I can go to anybody that's within my circle, my network, and just talk to them about my problems. I'm already doing that now.
Well, I mean, that's common, and that's an excellent point. And it is good to have those outlets. I mean, one of the things that we do in therapy is try and help people build their support group and their network. And you want to have a positive outlet. But then there's a couple things about that. One, everyone doesn't always have an outlet, and they don't feel comfortable telling their friends, their soror, or whoever it may be, some of their personal business or what's going on with them. A lot of times what we do is we try and put on a front sometimes for people, even for our closest individuals, those who are family members, or maybe we have to look strong for our family. We have to be the protector, the provider, or we're the one that the family looks at that you've always got it together, or people think you've always got it together, whether it be at work, at home, or whatever. So you need to find a place that's just for you. Because often when we're talking to family and friends, yes, that's a huge support. And I definitely advocate people to have those outlets. But one thing about therapy is just for you. That's someone who is focusing on you, your concerns, your well-being, and how you interact within your peer group and your circle and how well you're doing. The other thing is there are a lot of people who can provide what we call, say, supportive counseling. They can cheerlead for you. Some people maybe just tell you what you want to hear, like, you know what, you're perfect, everything is going great. The thing about therapy, the definition is therapy is one who helps to bring about change. And so when you come to therapy, what we do is try and identify what is your concern, why are you here, what's going on in your life, and how is it that we can bring about a positive change in your life to help you progress and better deal with whatever the circumstances there are. So we're using specific techniques and strategies to help bring about a particular change in you. And these are some things that while other friends can be super supportive, they're not for providing that specific change. So
I really appreciate that answer. And you know what? I actually wrote down the part where you say we sometimes put on a front for the people in our network. And it's so true. Because just think about how when we're on Instagram, right? We only show the highlight reel when things are going well, right? And we do that when we have our conversations with our families and friends. And when they're like, hey, how are you doing? And you're like, hey, everything's great. I'm good. Life is good. But then in actuality, that may not be the case. But when you go to therapy, there's an opportunity to be honest and be open and say, hey, here's some things that I'm challenged with, and I'm not sure what to do. And then a therapist, just as what you said, Robert, can sort of help guide you through that and make sense of it and potentially help you see what potential tools can help you navigate that, right?
and that's one of the concerns about social media is everything looks positive. You post your happy moments. There's some people who post when they're not doing well, but a lot of times we just see the trips, we see the people hanging out, and sometimes it causes you to think, well, I'm not hanging out like that, or I wish I could do that. Everybody else's life looks better, and it's giving a false impression. And so we have to be wary about where we're getting those impressions of ourselves, and that's another area where therapy can be extremely positive for an individual.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so with that in mind, just continuing on this thing, this aspect of the fears and the doubts that we may have about mental health care. So Tracy, I'll turn this over to you. And just thinking about, okay, all right, let's say we're thinking, okay, I want to go to a therapist. I heard that it can be expensive. And I don't know if I really want to pay for all that or if I can even afford it. So can you talk us through that?
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to share. And it's an honor to be on a panel with such distinguished panelists. I think one thing it's important to share is the reality that there's counseling services at a variety of levels. We have low-cost facilities in our communities and some no-cost facilities in our area. If individuals are working, they can certainly use their insurances. And if they decide to use their insurance, what they have to know is that that information that is shared is private and held confidentially, as well as there's some companies that also offer employee assistant program sessions. And so those are a minimum of anywhere from 6 to 8 sessions. So there's a whole host of counseling services within our communities. In addition to low-cost facilities, many of our churches or organizations that we are a part of are offering counseling services. And so I think it's important to recognize just our history within this country, our history of racism, oppression, and discrimination, and why that is so critically important to seek out support when needed.
Thank you, Tracy. I think I agree with you. I think it's very important that we seek out the help and the support when we need it, and we especially do it as early as possible, and we don't wait when things get very challenging or even potentially life-threatening, right? So I agree, it is very important that we do that early. And so I'd like to pivot the conversation a little bit away from fears, doubts, and the sort of the stereotypes that come with mental health. And really now let's talk about the benefits of therapy. And now we're addressing it and we're seeking it out. And so I'd like to turn it over to Bedford, turn it over to you. And so here we are, we have that understanding of mental health. We've already discussed the myths, the fears, and all of that. And so let's say, okay, here we are, we're interested, we're looking for a therapist. Would you say it's necessarily, do we necessarily need to find a Black therapist, or can we pretty much just go to anyone? What would you share? How would you share or discuss your thoughts around that?
Well, well, I would say it's kind of a little bit more complex than like breaking it down. Should you find a Black therapist?
Mm-hmm.
I think before anything, you need to find a good therapist and a real therapist, because sometimes people go to folks and they think they're going to get therapy, and that's not actually what they're getting or what's actually being offered, even if it's said like that. So when I think about a good therapist, I think of a therapist who's going to work within the context of the person who's in front of them, a person who's going to understand like what's going on with that person based on their history, based on the society around them, based on their situations, and based on your own kind of understanding of the interpersonal stuff that's happening with this person, and being able to listen and deal with the nuance. Now, for a Black person, are you more likely to find that in a Black therapist? Absolutely. If you're trying to, I'm on Psychology Today or whatever, and I'm looking for a therapist, finding a Black therapist is a really good shortcut to getting a good therapist. That said, there's not a huge amount of us out here, so if you're, I know people looking for a Black male therapist in Oakland, it's me and 3 other dudes, so we're not gonna be able to serve every person there. You wanna look for folks who are connected to Black therapists, folks who like, who show that they've demonstrated that they've been able to work with Black people in the past. They talk about Black people in their profiles and are willing to answer questions when you ask them very pointed questions about their comfort and their knowledge of working with Black people. If you come across a therapist and they don't want to talk to you about that, if you ask them directly and say, hey, do you work with Black people? How do you work with Black people? What kind of theories do you use? And they're like, well, you're good. A lot of my clients who are Black people coming in are coming from bad experiences with non-Black therapists, right? So they are out there, the people who are in that population who don't value us are out there, and we need to try to avoid them. And the best way to do that is by being as savvy a consumer as possible and treating this as a consumer experience. The same way if you go to a doctor, you're not going to go to somebody, you're looking for the specialist, right? Mm-hmm. Who knows how to do that surgery. You're not looking for the person who's like, oh, I can look it up in a book.
Right. I think I appreciate you sharing that. The part where you said about being a savvy consumer when looking for a therapist, looking for that support, looking for that care. I think that is very important. I think that for some folks, when they're thinking about looking for a therapist, they may be naturally thinking for themselves. They're thinking, well, I want to go to someone who looks like me because I don't want to have to explain what a microaggression is. I don't want to have to explain those things. And if I talk to a Black person, they may get me. If I'm being seen by an African-American therapist, they understand the nuances that are sometimes direct or indirect in how I have my relationships at work or outside of work or at home. They understand me. And so I appreciate you sharing that just in looking out at all of the therapists that are available within your respective regions or wherever you are, you may be able to find non-Black therapists who can support you. So I appreciate you sharing that. And so with that said, I'm going to pivot over to Courtney. And so as we just discussed with Bedford and just thinking about how to be that consumer that is really savvy when looking for a therapist, how would you suggest someone go about asking questions? Like what kind of questions to ask, or how do you screen for the right credentials? Because there are a lot of people out here who say, hey, I'm a therapist, or hey, I can help you. We've all seen it, especially in social media, right? They have a really nice social media page. They have a really nice website. And so how do we make sure that we are screening for correctly and that we are seeing someone who's reputable?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I was just putting in the chat after Bedford, or while Bedford was speaking, and I am going to put these here. These questions are, I have encouraged clients who I'm referring, right, to kind of utilize. They're taken directly from the National Alliance of Mental Illness, so NAMI. But these are some really great questions, like regarding just like cultural, like responsiveness, right? And like how folks, some of the questions I think that Bedford you were kind of saying, but, you know, to be able to ask folks, right? And, you know, asking Black therapists and non-Black therapists, right? Because some of these questions just around, like I said, I don't know necessarily competence, but kind of competence, right? And kind of working with, you know, Black individuals. And so these are questions that you can ask folks, right? And many people, you know, when you are first seeking out a therapist, they have, you know, a consultation, right? And so it's this first chance for you to really just get to talk to them, right? For them to be able to talk to you about, you know, what's going on, what you're needing, getting a sense of the therapist, they're getting a sense of you right before you actually, you know, commit to therapy. And so I think that those initial kind of conversations are helpful, right, to kind of be able to ask, right, kind of get to know, you know, who they are, right, and if, you know, if you feel like they'll be able to assist you and support you. But I think these questions are really helpful. Of course, in terms of like academic credentials, right? Like most folks should be telling you that right off the bat, right away, in terms of, you know, licensure and things like that. But I think in terms of more kind of like cultural competence, these are some, you know, good questions to be able to ask, folks.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that explanation. I think that's really, especially with the questions that you shared in the chat, I think that's going to be very helpful to people. I think it'll empower folks as they are seeking out therapists for the first time, being able to know what questions to ask, and then from there determining, okay, I feel good making this decision whether to go with this therapist and continue that conversation with them. So thank you for that. And so with that, I'm going to pivot over to Tracy. Just kind of touching on something that Bedford mentioned a moment ago, but I'd like to ask you, is the question around coaching and therapy, right? And I know that in your in the work that you've done in the past, you've worked with athletes, right? Where here they are, they're working with professional coaches, they're at peak performance, and here they are, they're also seeking out therapy. And so just for the general consumer, we are seeing coaches, we see life coaches, we see business coaches, and we also see therapists. So sometimes that seems to be muddled. It seems to be also confusing at the same time. So it's like, how do we know which one to go to and which one do we go to? And also just to add to that, and I like to point out the athletic part of it, because for some of us, I'll include myself, we tend to have like that athletic mindset because we were former athletes. And I know for some of us, me included, our glory days are well behind us, but nonetheless, we still have that mindset, right? So with that said, how do we know, like, when is it time to go to a coach or go to the therapist? And what's the difference between the two?
Absolutely. And I think it's confusing because that's the way the public wants it to be in regards to confusing. I think how you distinguish the differences, that you cannot call yourself a psychologist unless you are licensed by the state that you are currently residing in or providing services. So that's the first difference there, that people may call themselves therapists, but they cannot be considered psychologists or licensed social workers or licensed marriage and family counselors unless they are licensed by the state that they're practicing. So that's a real distinguished differences there. And oftentimes life coaches are not qualified to provide the therapy that we provide as licensed psychologists. It's different education, it's different practices. And one thing that I think Bedford shared earlier, if I'm not mistaken, that psychologists and psychology work toward bringing about change. And that's the distinguishing differences between life coaches or motivationalists and psychologists or social workers or licensed marriage and family therapists. We really work to bring about change in the individual lives. And what we certainly know post-pandemic, in the pandemic, so many folks have experienced excessive anxiety, expressed excessive depression, and it has caused some very destructive either behaviors or ways of functioning or coping. And that's why I think this presentation is so critically important, is recognizing that there are trained and licensed individuals. But more importantly, I would also want to say that just because that first therapist that you have decided or chosen for yourself doesn't work out, don't stop there, especially when you know that you are in need of services. And I think that's what's critically important, that we have to emphasize that the first relationship may not work out. And if it doesn't, then you move to the next. And you want to find someone who has an expertise in the area that you are struggling the most in.
I appreciate you sharing that last part about if it doesn't work out with that particular therapist, it's okay. It's not necessarily an indication of you or them. It's just that the relationship that you're trying to build with them may not be a great fit. And so it's okay. Just move on to the next person. Don't just write it off and think, well, you know what? I did not enjoy that session. It didn't work. They didn't solve my problems. So forget it. This therapy thing is not for me. So I'm done with that. So I appreciate you sharing that part. So
I had one thing about what she just said. How it was beautiful how you broke down the difference of what a psychologist is and a licensed psychologist. And one thing for the consumer to be worried about is there's a lot of coaches or other people who are different kind of counselors who will say doctor. And they don't have a doctorate in psychology. They'll have a doctorate in a different field. It may be, I've seen business administration and just other fields. And then they'll say, but I'm Dr. such and such. And it's really unethical, and you shouldn't do that. And there are rules against that, but people still do that. And so on their business card, it'll say, I'm Dr. Dan, or I'm Dr. Johnson, or whatever it is. And in your mind, you're thinking, oh, well, he's portraying himself as a coach or as a therapist, and he says doctor, so the credentials. And then upon further investigation, when you go to their page, it'll say, well, I got a doctorate in anthropology, but I am a coach. So it's up to you as a consumer to really do your homework. And because there are people who are doing unethical things out there, and they're portraying themselves with a skill set that they don't actually have. And the danger to that is that you may go to this person and have a negative experience and then be turned off from therapy completely. And so, particularly as Tracy said, please, if you had a bad experience, give it another shot. 70% of people don't come back after the first session, but they need to try again and find that match with a therapist. And again, do your homework, research their credentials. You as the consumer, it's up to you initially to start there.
Yeah, one thing, I know we're off because I agree, and this is something that really, I think most of us we're probably all really passionate about this, because we see folks out there. And one thing that folks don't know is that coaching is a technique that our discipline came up with as a way that we as licensed people do stuff. It wasn't really meant to be what it is out in the community right now. And just to piggyback on the piece about ethics and licensure, what that really means to the consumer is that the state of California, the reason it has licenses is because it's protecting the consumer, the public, from us. right? It's regulating us to make sure that we don't hurt people. And what a lot of people don't understand is that if you do some of the stuff that we're trying to do, just like if a physician tries to stitch someone up and you get the homie from the street to try to stitch you up, you're going to end up with some bad stuff happening. Like that happens. And so it can be really harmful, not just a bad, it could be like a bad experience, but it could also be traumatizing to be with someone who's telling you that they're a therapist, trying to get you to feel as safe as what we try to do, and not understanding how to do that. They can do real harm. And it's not every coach, but they're out there. And they also do harm financially, because ain't no reason they need to be charging $2,000 for an hour when they don't even got credentials to, that's a problem. But anyway, so I'll let you get back on track. Sorry about that.
Well, thank you for that. That was helpful. So I'm going to pivot and I'm going to ask a question to Lori and Robert. I'm going to have you tag team on this question. So when it comes to how we view mental health, a lot of times for many families, they're trying to figure out, how do you balance that? So for Lori and Robert, how would you, from the lens of mental health, right? Mental health therapy and counseling, how would you answer the question to people who are thinking about their families? Like, how do I balance work, my kids, my relationships, all of that at the same time? And is it really a matter of me seeking out therapy and counseling to address that? Or do I need to just get better at time management, right? It's like, what do I need to do? Or is it just all in my head and that's just life and I just have to figure it out? So
Right.
Great point.
Robert, yeah.
I'll defer to Lori to start.
Okay, thank you. Good question. Again, as all of these questions have been. So I think in terms of self-care is really what we're getting at. And how do you find time for self-care? Because it is critical that you have that time for self-care so that you can be available for your relationships, for your children. And at the same time, depending on where you are in your life, that can be pretty tough to do. So, one, I think it's important to define and redefine what does time for myself mean at different times in your life. If you don't have children or you're not married, you probably have a lot of more time. Of course, you still have work demands and maybe other demands with your parents and things like that, but you probably have a little bit more flexibility to get in that time for yourself. And then you add in a partner, and that starts to decrease on time for yourself, but not, you still have a little bit more flexibility with that. And then you add in kids and you add in work. So I think the more that you are committed in your life, and depending on where you are in your life, the age of your kids, how long you've been married, um, how long you've been at your job, is it a new job? I think you always have to redefine that definition of time for myself. At certain times, it's just if you wake up in the morning 20 minutes before everyone else, that's going to be your time for yourself. When you're at work and you have lunch hour, that's going to be time for yourself. There may be times that you don't have an entire weekend to yourself. But I think it's important to remember that that time may come around again. And so just redefining what does time for myself mean and what can you do given your current life responsibilities is really important. The second thing I think you have to do is sometimes be creative in terms of getting time for yourself. Again, if you have children, someone mentioned churches before, when you go to some of the larger churches, they have a lot of organized activities for the children. And you going into church and dropping your kids off in youth ministry and then going into the service by yourself, that may give you an hour and a half, 2 hours time for yourself. And so I think you have to be creative in really looking at what is time for yourself. How are you going to get that? Also, being able to reach out for support. If you have friends, sometimes you have friends who are happy to have an hour or two with your kids just to give you time um, to have time for yourself or time with your partner. And so I would say the three things I would leave with that is just continue to redefine what does time for myself mean at a different time in your life. Um, be creative in how you can get that time for yourself, and then also reach out for support. Family, friends, grandmas, they can oftentimes relieve you, even if not for a day. They can relieve you for a couple hours just to have some time for yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that response. And as I was hearing you say that, and I've been hearing that all this week, just the word being intentional about how you move and the things that you do to address your needs, and really just trying to figure out the best way to support you and your loved ones. So I appreciate you sharing, not only defining that, but really sharing concrete examples and ways that we can really help address our mental health through self-care. And what does that actually look like on a day-to-day? So thank you again for that. So I just have a few more questions left, but before I do that, I just want to share with everyone that's joining us out in the audience. We will be shifting over to Q&A in just a moment. Like I said, I just have a few more questions for our panel. So please be sure to get your questions in through the chat, and I'll try and get them in before we wrap up soon.
Sandra, let me touch on one thing that you said.
Sure.
When you initially posed that question, you said, are these things necessary? How do I balance, or is it all in my head? That is one of the most critical things when somebody says, they kind of dismiss it, like, this isn't whatever. Let me just focus on work. Let me just focus on family. This is all in my head. When it's all in, it is all in your head, but it needs to be treated and it needs to be released. And that is one of the things that we dismiss so often. And as Lori was saying, then we don't take care of ourselves. We're so busy taking care of everyone else and being the person for everyone else. There isn't that self-care. So the key to therapy is recognizing that you need to take care of oneself first. And when it's keeping it all in your head and you're pushing it down, it's going to come out somewhere else. It's not a possibility of it might get pushed down. No, it's going to come out somewhere else. My favorite example is when you push a ball down under the water. You can shove it down as far as you want to, but it's going to squirt up somewhere on the other side. And so it's going to come out. You may not recognize what's going on with you, but you may recognize that you're snappy with your partner. You may come in and who drank the last of the milk? And that's just an issue. And you just going off like, oh, and where are the cookies? And then the kids, why are you leaving your shoes there? And you're just snapping at them. And you may not even realize that really it's your frustration, and you're maybe not getting quality time with your partner or quality time with yourself. So that is super critical. When you said, is it all in my head? We need to help you process what's in your head, because then that's what causes stress. And then that's where you're like, why am I having these stomach problems? Why am I having these other physical ailments? Because mental difficulties manifest, or we say somaticize, or basically they come out in other ways. Like I said, it's either going to come out you snapping at somebody, it's going to come out the stress in your body, it's going to come out in your back, your stomach, or whatever it is, but it's there. You cannot just push it down. You have to treat it and take care of it at some point. So,
I'm really glad that you said that. And that's actually one of the other questions that I was going to ask, is that sometimes but before we see it in ourselves, sometimes we see it in others, and we're thinking, why are they always yelling at me about this? Like, I'm sorry I drank the last of the apple juice. I'll buy some more later tonight if you really want it so bad. I'm sorry. Or you know what? I'm sorry I'm late. Why are you so upset? Or you know what? I noticed that the way you've been eating, your diet does not seem to be healthy. You are always eating sweets, right? Or I've just noticed all these change in your behavior. You're always upset, your diet has changed, or you seem you're always off to yourself. You don't really talk to anyone. And I always get like one word answers from you, or you just don't communicate at all. So I've noticed all these changes. So I'm going to pivot it over to Courtney and Tracy. Maybe you can both tag team, because I know that you, over the years now, you've been seeing a lot of clients and patients coming to you. And so let's say you have someone coming to you saying, look, I've noticed a change in my partner, in my loved one, in my colleague, in my friend. how do I know, how do I encourage them to seek therapy or to get help? Because we can say, oh, go to a doctor if you're constantly having a stomach ache. But when it's related to mental health, that can be a touchy subject. As we've all mentioned earlier, it's still taboo. So how do we encourage a loved one to go seek therapy, to go seek help?
And I can start and then turn it over to Courtney. I think definitely in a loving, compassionate, and empathetic way. One of the things that I share both with husbands or wives, whoever I'm seeing, is that one way a person is often open is being able to share what you've noticed. So it's not just one symptom or it's just not one level of agitation. What you're able to do is identify a whole host of symptoms, whether it's emotionally, whether it's physically, or behaviorally, or even spiritually. You're no longer going to church, and you used to go to church all the time, or as you said, you seem more blue and more depressed and sad than before, or you're more agitated and angry. When you're driving, it feels really uncomfortable because you're driving very erratically and drastically. And so I think once you're able to identify a whole host of symptoms over a significant period of time, then in an empathic and loving way, sharing with that person that I think it may be important for you to seek out some support. And what I've shared with clients, with their partners, share with them that they're open to helping them find that support so they're not alone. And you may have to take the lead. If you've noticed a whole host of symptoms, you may have to take the lead in helping and supporting your partner find a competent, licensed therapist to work with. Courtney?
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with everything you said, Tracy, and yeah, specifically the empathy and the empathetic approach and the compassionate approach, right? And I think that a lot of folks, like I said, Sandra, before, it's scary, right? And so I think being able to also acknowledge, right, the fear, right, and acknowledge that this it could potentially be, right, a scary process initially, right? And I think that's where some of the resistance comes from, right, with folks, is that it feels difficult, right, to start the therapy process, right? And so being able to acknowledge, that it's scary and acknowledge the fear of preparing for some resistance. I think that that's always helpful, right? And I always tell folks, and I know that we can only support people, we can only offer information, right? We can only point them in the right direction, but at the end of the day, right, it's going to be their decision. But I definitely, so yeah, just preparing, right, for some resistance potentially, but I think the helping part, like you said, Tracy, is really important too, right? Just being able to provide them with information, right, that they might not know, right, to kind of reduce the fear. But yeah, the supporting, right, as much as you can, I think is the most helpful, but also knowing that, it's going to have to be a decision that ultimately they make.
Yeah. And one more question for the two of you as sort of like a follow-up question before I go into my last question. So with that said, you were talking about, Tracy, you touched on a really great point in just thinking about monitoring their behavior. If you pick up on something and you've noticed, okay, they've been doing certain things a lot more now, or they stopped engaging in certain activities that they used to do all the time and now they're not doing it anymore. So for the two of you, are there any real differences, or is it about the same when it comes to signs of poor mental health between adults and children? So are there certain things that we should look out for? Like, okay, children, poor mental health sort of manifests this way, or it manifests in a different way when it's for adults. So I'll leave that to either one of you to answer that question, because I think it's important for us to be mindful of that.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you distinguishing their difference, because there are differences. I do mainly work with adults, but the adults that I work with that have children, I have to share with them that the symptoms are different. I think with children, you will find them becoming more isolated, more alone or solemn, not participating in a lot of activities that they used to participate in outdoor, maybe being more online than before. And that isolation or sadness or anger that you may see in kids more so than adults is an indication that there's either anger or depression. And the anger is that just depression that's coming out. So I think the symptoms are different. And if you hear kids talking about wanting to harm themselves, or if you see kids cutting themselves or cutting their hair, or just doing things that they normally don't participate in. I think as Black folks, we have to keep it real, authentic, and 100. And that's what I do with my clients. I don't beat around the bush. I let them know what it is. And I'm very forthright in challenging them to come out of denial, because oftentimes we have lived in spaces of denial based on our upbringing and family history. And so one of the things I think is important as family members, when we see our young kids struggling, to not deny that reality, but to begin to explore what's going on with them. Are they being bullied? Is something happening on social media that's affecting them? So yes, the symptoms are very different.
Yeah, I was just going to add, a lot of times we can see it with children in terms of like and I put it in quotes, right? Like acting out, right? Or aggression, not listening, right? In school, or not being able to focus, right? Or, you have those children in the classroom who might be hard for them to sit still, right? And I think that, some people will, say that, like I said, children are like, they're acting out, or they have some type of conduct, right? Like disorder and things like that. And a lot of times it can be just how, trauma is like manifesting for them, right? And so I think that we sometimes attribute, some of those behaviors to like, we neglect, right, like the mental health aspect of kind of what's going on with them, because certain behaviors look a certain way. And so definitely for me, what I've seen is like, more aggression, or kind of not listening and things like that. But definitely could be a sign that depression, anxiety, PTSD, some of those things might be happening for them.
Thank you for that. So my last question for the panel, and Bedford, you have the honor of answering this question for us before we go over to Q&A. So to the audience, please put your questions in the chat. So we'll get to it as when we can within the time we have left. So Bedford, you touched on something earlier that is leading me to this question I'm going to ask, is about being discerning as that savvy consumer and looking for therapists, right? And with the last 18, 20 months now, here we are, for people who are actively seeking out therapists, we weren't able to do that in person. So it's all gone virtual. However, we've seen this progression of all of these apps, if you will, of therapists being made available through spaces like BetterHelp or Talkspace, right? And so can you touch on sort of maybe the pros and cons, or some of the things we should be looking out for between the differences between those two when it comes to in-person therapy and virtual therapy, especially through apps?
Yeah, so appreciate taking the anchor role. So the first thing I would say is those like Talkspace and Better, like it's not, those are, I would say avoid those. Don't mess with those. Like, I'm just gonna say it straight up. Like, those are not good spaces to be in. And there's a difference between virtual or remote therapy and using an app to like chat with someone and do these other things that they're doing there. So first of all, from the perspective of does something work? Virtual therapy where you're looking at someone, and we're able to see you and hear you and like interact with you, there's research that shows that this works. Right, it works. It has the same efficacy as being in the office with someone. I joke with my clients because I actually run a completely virtual practice that was mostly virtual before the pandemic. But as soon as that happened, it was like, I'm good. I don't need to be in the same room with you. What I joke with my clients is like the real only difference, as long as we have good light and I can see your body and you can see my body, is that I don't have to smell your perfume. I don't have to smell your personal products and stuff. That's good for me. You know, I mean, it's a kind of thing that you don't talk about when you're in grad school, all these things that come into being in a close proximity with someone in a room. But and it also means that when you're sneezing and coughing and sniffling, I don't have to worry about it, and vice versa. Now, in terms of these apps, what's going on with those? And it's funny because I teach an ethics course I teach master's level counselors, and we talk about this a lot. These apps are not mental health services. They're tech communication services, right? And so like basically you have a group of engineers who come together, engineers, PR people and all this stuff, and say, we want to disrupt mental health. And so in disrupting mental health, they mean that they're going to somehow figure out how to do this better than the people who have been trained to do this. And Talkspace specifically, what they did is they came and they grabbed a bunch of therapists and they put them on this app, and they kind of just put it out there so anyone could have access. So whether you're in the same state, didn't matter. If you were international, didn't matter. All these things that were happening that were literally breaking the law in a lot of states. And from our perspective, what that did was it endangered all those therapists. And a lot of therapists lost licenses and all this stuff in the first iteration of that app. Now they have supervision and some other stuff to add to it. But the problem is that what we do isn't just talk to people. You're not supposed to be, I've seen these commercials, you're not supposed to be in the pool or in the jacuzzi talking to your therapist. That's not a therapeutic space to be in. We're not for that, you know? We're also not for just texting you anytime you want to. There's therapeutic approaches that do that, but they're very specific and for very specific people. We make boundaries, you know, it's like what Robert was saying. It's like our job is not to make you just feel better. Our job is to push you to change. Right? That means that sometimes we have to push you into a space that does not feel good. And a lot of these apps are all about your convenience and about making you feel good in the moment and really causing dependence. And this is a big deal. If you know anything about the way that these tech organizations work, they want you to be on their stuff, right? They want you to be on the app. They want you to be using the app. They make it so that, you know, they put colors in it and sounds in it and use and track how much time you're looking at the app, you know? They're doing that with these services, and that's not what we're about. We get taught to not make people dependent upon us. That's like a really important ethical part, because it's easy. If I'm a person who's helping you, who's listening to you, empathetic with you, and doing all these things, then you're going to want to spend time with me, and that means I can take your money. I can extract money over and over, week after week after week after week, forever. Right? That's not helping you, right? So I'll try to wrap it up, but I think that it's important to, one, in the best way I can go back to, like, you know, the way my mom would say it, or the way family would say it, you know, you get what you pay for. If you're paying $30 to talk to somebody on chat, you are not getting the service that one of us can provide. And kind of going back to the whole cost of therapy piece, therapy costs what it does, you know, $150, $200, $250 an hour, whatever it might be, because of the expertise that someone's bringing in, right? And there's a reason for that. If you get it at $10 an hour, there's something going on there that doesn't match. Someone's not getting paid right. Or if someone's getting paid right, then you're not getting a service that's worth it.
You said so many gems, just right then and there. I hope the audience took note of that. And I even took note of it because I think it's really important. And just to summarize, pretty much you're saying that when it comes to interacting with your therapist, it should really truly be a professional type of relationship, because they're there to help you to be a better person. They're not your friend, right? They're there to help you to be the best possible human being. And when it comes to your mental health, they're there to be there to support you and give you the not only the support, but the tools you need to help you get to help you reach your goals. And I think that's so key. And then just the other point that you made about You get what you pay for. So if you think that, oh, I don't want to pay that much to see them, I'd rather go over here and pay this very cheap rate per hour per text to interact with a therapist or a counselor, you get what you pay for. You're probably not getting the type of solutions, tools you really truly need to get down to the root of the issues or the problems or that you're experiencing. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And so, like I said, that's the last question that I have for the panel. And I'm going to turn it over to the Q&A, and I'm going to look through here and see what questions that have come through. And while I'm doing that, again, folks, if you have a question, feel free to put it in right now. It seems that we addressed some of these already, the ones that have come through. So just in case there are any last minute questions that come through, so I'll just go ahead and just wrap it up. And I'll allow you all to just share just one last point with all of us that you want us to take away when it comes to mental health. So I'll start off with Robert, and anyone else, you can kind of just chime in as we go along.
I think one of the last points, I know we had talked about maybe addressing COVID and telework, and like a lot of things are happening now for convenience, these Zoom meetings, working from home. You kind of got to know you and whether or not that's a good thing for you, because I'm more of a people person. And they've granted me the ability to telework at my hospital. And, you know, when COVID was heavy, I telework, but it's also isolating. And you know, I'm one of those people who like walking through the halls, talking to people. That gives me life, that gives me energy, that helps me to be able to touch base with people. That drive to work, that whether it's 15 minutes to be alone in the car with the music or whatever you're doing, those are things that give me life. And I also need to be on a schedule. Like when I have to get up to go to work in the morning, that means I'm going to eat breakfast in the morning. That means I'm going to get on my schedule to exercise. When you're teleworking, you can pull that laptop up into the bed, roll over, log in. And so think about things, and whether just because something is offered to you doesn't mean it's always great for you. Okay. And you have to know you and how you're going to react to that, because you start to become more and more isolated without that contact to people, and then it starts to impact. And that's for me. Now, a lot of people say, no, telework is great, you know, and it allows some people to have more time with the kids. It cuts down on that hour-and-a-half commute per morning. So there are positive aspects, but you have to know if it's good for you. Like I said, that structure and getting up in the morning, walking out, because then it also makes me exercise, walking up the stairs to the building, walking to the different buildings. When I'm teleworking, I find myself sitting at this chair all day long. So know you. And then one more thing about that is with the kids. Kids need that contact also with people. And that's one of the things. So when they're doing these virtual classes, when they're doing, you know, my daughter's dance class turned virtual, their school was virtual for a while. They need that contact with people also. They need that physical exercise. And we didn't touch about much on this, but physical exercise is just as important to your mental health. I think Courtney or one of you guys mentioned diet also. Eating well, all those things. But let me wrap it up and pass it on to somebody else.
But all good points. Thank you for sharing that. We didn't really get a chance to touch too much on this whole aspect of working from home, but that's a good point. So thank you for sharing that. So I'll turn it over to the rest of the panelists to go ahead and share their last moments, last comments. Sorry.
Hi, this is LaTronda Lumpkins, and I did put a question in the chat, but I was having some tech difficulties, so I'm not sure if it's showing up.
Okay.
But yeah, just wanted to, I have my hand raised too when you're ready.
Yes, I will. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question now, and in the time that we have, hopefully you can keep it brief, and then we'll try and answer it before we wrap up. So please share now.
Great, thank you. I think this is wonderful. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate just the expertise that we have on the panel. I appreciated what Dr. Lori Brody said about we as Black people we have our own set of problems, and even within our community, our children have their own set of problems, the women, the men, and it needs to be addressed appropriately. And I also want to add that there's a concept that or a new way of looking at therapy or health and healing in the mental health field that's focused more on trauma-informed care. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. So I'm just going to read off my statement in the chat, because that way it'll flow quicker. So I think it's important to also focus on the collective approaches to healing. The new focus on trauma-informed care is important nonetheless, but we also need to be looking at ways that Black people heal. We also want to address the importance of looking at trauma for Black folks as a collective experience. Example, racialized trauma and what we've just gone through in 2020, which requires a different approach. There are many African-centered approaches, such as the Ubuntu framework, which focuses on cultural psychology and community connectedness and our collective consciousness, because we as Black people have a collective identity. And so Ubuntu is the concept of I am because we are. So my question is, how do practitioners move away from Western psychology practices and evidence-based research, even though that evidence-based practices are helpful and important, but they're not always evident and useful for us? How do we move away from this evidence-based perspective to a more community-focused practice, or African-centered practices that speaks more to us as a people and our culture?
Can I jump in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge, thank you for asking that question. And I apologize for missing it earlier, but I think that's a good question. So I was going to ask if anyone wants to answer, but Bedford, I'll let you go and go first.
So I think that, how can I put this? So this is, as a person who's been, I don't know how everybody's been involved with ABPSI and Black psychology, but this is like something that's really important to me. I think that in the question, there doesn't have to be that dichotomy all the time. Evidence-based practice is just a way of looking at, does this work, right? And so I think the way that we should approach this is to say, to be fair and honest about the fact that African-centered and community-focused practices work. They are evidence-based, right? And so we don't have to be, I think we as practitioners and people who are consuming and coming in should be looking for therapists who are looking for evidence-based work, because that means that you know that it's working. You've seen it work in the past, as opposed to making stuff up as you go, right? But it can be focused from our community perspective. It can be focused from our values perspective. It can use our reality. So I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist primarily. The whole idea of cognitive behavioralism is that you're trying to work within people's realities, the way they think and what they've learned, right? And so if you use that and you put it from a European perspective and you only use European context, then it can be very harmful to Black people. But if you integrate an African-centered perspective and a mindset, and you work with the nuance, the person who's coming in, what the way that they express their culture from African-centered or a Black-centered or whatever they're kind of bringing in, then it can be really, really useful and really helpful. But it doesn't have to be at odds. I think that the best therapists, they integrate that work, because then it's more accessible. Because the other thing that we don't talk, that's important to understand when we're talking about African-centered work, is that if we go so far to the side, it feels really good. It feels like it's prideful, but then insurance doesn't cover it. And suddenly I can do this African-centered work, but now you got to come out of pocket. And so I think that we can integrate it so that it's more accessible and work for everyone.
Thank you for that, Bedford.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Tracy, chime in.
Right on.
And I would just like to add to that, I think it's a comprehensive approach. I too, was developed from a cognitive behavioral and now incorporate emotions. But my bottom line is I'm a Black girl from Compton. And that's as culturally competent as you can possibly be, in my opinion. So, one of the things that I think, not only do I provide that cultural perspective, but also recognize the heritage and the values and beliefs that we bring as an African centered or African American person. And I think that's what you have to balance with, yes, evidence based, because you don't want someone that's not practicing any interventions that's not going to bring about change or challenging a person to be the best that they could be or to bring about change in the community as well. And I would just like to say, as a final point, with all of my clients, I think one thing that's critically important is that we learn to affirm ourselves and learn to affirm who we are as individuals and not feel as though through the social media, which is so false, that we have to look at ourselves through a lens that's not authentic and that's not real. And thank
Yes,
you again.
yes,
And
yes.
one last
Yes.
critical point that I wanted to add about all of this is when you were talking about looking for different therapists or even the things that LaTronda just brought up, you want someone who's skilled in your particular area that you need help in. We are not, as medical doctors have specialty areas, we as clinicians have specialty areas also. And when we're talking about match, it's important to find, if you want to find a Black therapist or a Black male therapist, as Bedford says, the first thing you want to do is find a good therapist, a skilled therapist who can help you. I don't do a whole lot of specific trauma work. So I can't treat everything that comes in the door. Okay, so I need to be able to tell you, no, I have a person who specializes in trauma because trauma is a very particular area that they use specific strategies to bring about that change. Now it will be done, and I'm going to pump up my wife who had to leave, Dr. Lori Brody. She's a culturally competent psychologist. She's a Black woman from South Central who understands the background of Black people and Black women, but she's also skilled in trauma work. And so you have to know what your presenting issue is, and hopefully the therapist can guide you. If you just cold call me and then I start to ask you some questions and I realize, oh, this is a more of a trauma area, I should guide you towards someone who can help you. Every therapist that you call shouldn't be saying, I can take whatever you get that comes through the door, because we do specialize. I don't necessarily work with young kids. I will tell you, I work with adults. I don't do some of the hardcore trauma work because my wife has a specialty area in that. And so find a clinician that specializes in what you're presenting concerns are, and that's what's going to help you the most. And now within that, hopefully you can find someone who's culturally competent that understands your background, how you got to that experience of trauma. But there are certain things like some of those sexual traumas or other traumas that, or whether it be PTSD, whether it be from combat veteran or whatever, or growing up in a gang neighborhood, that they're going to be able to do specific things to help you. So you want to find someone skilled in your particular area.
Yes, yes, I appreciate that. And I do want to say that you said it earlier. This is very important that, and the reason why we should be working with a skilled professional, because you guys are moving people to change and transformation. And it may not always feel good or look pretty, but it's the work that needs to be done. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
And thank you for your question. That was a great question. It really sparked additional insights for all of us to be mindful of. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
So with that, I'm going to move on to the next question that we got in the Q&A. And I'll turn this over to Courtney. So it addresses a point that we made earlier about how do we look for the signs or symptoms of, well, let me backtrack and just rephrase. If we notice changed behavior or change of moods for our loved ones or for a friend or a family member, but here we are, we took your suggestion, right? And we started monitoring them, and then we compassionately, we used empathy, we led with love and suggesting that they seek out therapy. What if they tell us, no, I'm good, or I don't need therapy, I'll just pray and I'll be fine. Or, you know what, I probably just need rest. I'll take some time off. I'll be fine. I don't need therapy. So what if they dismiss the suggestion, the recommendation that we make, but we notice that the behavior continues or it gets worse? So what do we do then? Like, what is there anything we can do at that point? So how do we address that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a hard question, because it all, for me, it all depends on your capacity, right? Because I think we all have a different capacity. And I think that some folks they might be able to suggest a little bit more, right? Continue to try to support, continue to give information, continue to point people in the right direction, right? Like I said, I think Tracy, right? Continue to like point out what's going on. And then I think other folks, right? Might not be able to continue to do that, right? We have our own things happening, our own things kind of going on. So it really depends on the person and their capacity, and, how much you feel like you can take care of yourself, but also, right, continue to try to help this person. I think as much as we can, right, especially if we notice that they're declining, right, I think as much as we can, being able to, like I said, continue that support and that help and provide as much information as we can is the most helpful, because of course we don't want to see our loved ones, like I said, declining, right, in that way. So as much as we can, but I think there gets to a certain point that I think I mentioned earlier, that we can only do so much, right? And we have to decide, I think, what that point is for us. And sometimes it looks like being okay with that resistance, even though that's really, really, really difficult and it's very, very hard to watch. But sometimes it looks like, okay, I've done, as much as I can. Now, how do I continue to like take care of myself, right? How do I maybe then need to start setting boundaries with this person, right? So that I can be okay, just knowing where they're at. And I think that is a difficult point to have to come to, of course. But I think that people, I always just believe that people have to come to these decisions, kind of at the end of the day, right, on their own. And like I said, I think the support from others and like being able to talk to them is absolutely what we need to do, because some people just don't know. Like I said before, they're fearful. But once they have all the information and they even are recognizing it themselves, right, but aren't wanting kind of to take that, next step in kind of seeking out help and support, I think then we have to think about, okay, done what I can. How do I, still kind of be okay?
That's a very good point, because we can only do so much when we try to encourage and push our loved ones to seek out care and seek out the support that we know that they need. But if they don't actually take action, if they don't take that step to do so, then at some point, as you said, we need to take a step back and just say, okay, they've made the decision, so there's only so much we can do. So I appreciate you breaking that down and sharing that. So with that, let's see. I think I addressed all the questions in the Q&A. And so I thank you all for staying on, because we covered a lot. And if you all know that for some of you not aware, we have more questions, but just to be respectful of time, there's just so many other questions that we could have asked, because there's just so many different aspects when it comes to mental health. And so with that, I want to pivot back to the question that I posed to the panelists about sharing their final remarks. And I know, Robert, you've already done so. So I want to pivot to the rest of the panel to be able to share their final remarks at this time. Anyone can jump in at this time. Bedford.
I think I've shared. I would just want to just emphasize the importance of mental health and well-being as Black Americans, especially in this day and age. I think more so than ever before, coming off the trauma of George Floyd and others that have been murdered in our society. And I think we would be dismissed as mental health professionals if we didn't acknowledge the pain in our own lives. So as mental health professionals and myself, definitely seeking out support from those that I know in the field to help me deal with the pressures and stressors that the pandemic has created. And I would just want those who have been a part of the experience to recognize if they themselves have seen a shift or change in their own behavior, and not be in denial, but acknowledge truth and recognize that there are professionals that can provide the support and assistance that you need. So once again, thank you for putting together this panel.
Thank you.
I can
Yeah,
go
please.
and I'll try to be brief. I think one thing that I just want to try to put out there to folks is remember that you deserve the best treatment, the best care, the best support that you can possibly get. I think a lot of times we're out in the community and we think we have to do things by ourselves. We think that we have to bootstrap ourselves. You know, we put a boot on and we're going to climb this mountain without any help or support from anybody else. Something I learned deeply at UC Irvine during my time there was that mentorship and some community support was really the only way that you're going to do anything healthy in your life. So as you kind of move through and you're feeling, if you start feeling sad, you start feeling anxious, if you start feeling like you can't make it, but whatever's going on in your life, you don't have to do that by yourself. And here's the piece that I think maybe can animate just a little bit more. White folks don't ever try to do it by themselves, right? They always ask for help. They always looking for support. They always feel entitled to that stuff. We should feel just as entitled to living a healthy, happy life as anybody else. And so that means if you need to ask for help from a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist, if that means you need to get your family to support you, if you need to put a GoFundMe so you can pay for some fees or something like that, whatever you need to do, you need to value yourself enough to make sure that you're going to be healthy and available for you and for the people that depend on you. And it's not a single thing. It's a very communal activity, even when you're focused on yourself. So thank you all.
Thank you, Bedford. So there was a hand raised for one more question within the Q&A. I want to try and pull that in before we finish wrapping up. So another hand raise came in from Dominique. So I'll let you ask your brief question at this time.
Yeah, it is. I just had a question for the anybody on the panel. What are your thoughts on medication? I know that there's like this big distrust between Black folks and medication, but I do think that some mental health issues do require medication. So I just wanted to kind of see your thoughts. I know a lot of the time Black folks are like, I don't want to be put on no meds and all of these other things. So I just wanted to hear from anybody on the panel. Thanks so much too, Sandra. I appreciate it.
No problem. That's a really good question. I'm glad you posed that. So I'll leave that to anybody on the panel that feels that they can answer that question.
Well, I'll start. There's definitely the concern that that we may be over-medicated or given medications that we don't need. And that often does happen. We're often overdiagnosed and diagnosed more severely, particularly in kids. You may think that they're just pushing meds on the kids. On the flip side, there are times these medications are helpful. And there are conditions where the medications truly can assist. When we're talking about severe psychosis, when we're talking about some of the more severe bipolar type conditions where people are having those dramatic mood swings. And one of the ways I try and think about the medications is there are times where you may need to start the medications to bring a person to a point that they can benefit from therapy, because you need to stabilize them to get them to a point to where they can actually benefit from therapy. And then there are some conditions where we have to start to view the medication somewhat as like if you have chronic auditory hallucinations, you hear voices chronically, you may have to start to view the medications as something that I'm going to need to take for the rest of my life to help maintain this so I can have a quality of life. Okay, and it depends on the condition, and that's where you need to find a very skilled therapist or psychiatrist and therapist to walk you through that. um I don't, again, I'm not an advocate of always just pushing meds on people, but there are conditions that really we see benefit from the medications, and they are needed and useful, and people can start to recognize with, I mean, bipolar is extremely common, and some people are going to need the meds to help stable them out from the extreme lows and then those extreme highs. But yet, then they'll learn some therapeutic strategies to help manage that over time to where temper, they may not need the meds as much, or they may need the meds periodically at a certain time. But you need to be able to develop some insight into your symptoms to know when you need these medications. But sometimes the meds have to get you to the point where you can are open to hearing it and can benefit from treatment. So.
Thank you for that. I think you shared a very good point. I think just in general, people are apprehensive to taking medication. And when it comes to mental health, there's that apprehension because they think that it's not going to really help them. It's not going to benefit them. It'll actually make things worse for them, or it's going to put them in a mood that's not desirable. And so now they don't want to do that. So I think that's a good point that you share, that there are going to be situations, there are going to be times and conditions where it is necessary. So it's really important that you are conscious of that and that you work with your clinician on what is the best plan for you and what does that look like short term and long term, and how that's going to really benefit you. So thank you for
And one last point on that. I mean, a lot of people are aversive to medications, but yet they'll smoke weed and drink and do all these other things. I don't want to take the meds, but then they'll do all of this other stuff. No, I'm not putting that junk in my body, but then they're doing all of this other. You know, what you're doing is self-medicating in a way that you're not really treating the symptom. Okay, so they'll smoke, they'll wake up and hit the joint, hit it at lunch, hit it at eat. And basically, when you start to get behind that, why are you smoking so much? Because I can't cope with some of these other thoughts, and I can't cope with the weed helps mellow me out. You'll start to talk to them. The weed slows me down. What do you mean it slows you down? Because my mind is racing, or I have all these thoughts. The weed slows me down. Well, that's actually something else that's going on. Or the weed stops the voices, or the alcohol numbs the voices, or the alcohol numbs those negative thoughts that I have in my head. You're not treating the actual problem. You need to get into therapy and treat what are those the origin of those negative thoughts. So again, people that say, I don't want to take meds, yet they're doing everything else under the sun, and that's not the solution. So, but it is true, meds have their side effects, but you can work with the psychiatrist to try a different medication, to try to find the lowest effective dose of the medication. So, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm glad you expanded on that. So thank you for that. I will turn it over to Courtney to have the last thought and share. I don't know if you want to expand on the last comment or just share a different final comment here.
Yeah, I guess just a final comment word, just around, I talk so much just about self-compassion and like grace. And so just acknowledging that there's a lot happening to put it short, right? Like there's a lot going on individually for us, right? Collectively for us, historically, right? And so I think the self-compassion is so important. And so I talk to, like I said, a lot of folks that I work with just about just giving yourself grace, right? And letting yourself feel and knowing, like acknowledging that it's difficult when we can. I know we all have so many responsibilities, and sometimes it feels like we can't even go there, right? We can't even go into those feelings, right? But I think, you know, when you're able to, and when you can, right, being able to feel and being able to know, you know, telling yourself that like this is okay, that it's difficult, right? So just normalizing, you know, that there's a lot going on. And I think the self-care piece, I think Lori might have touched on it earlier. And I know a lot of times we see self-care as competing with our responsibilities, right? You know, if I do this, taken away from this, right? If I take care of myself in this area, then, you know, I might be lacking in this area. And I encourage folks to kind of switch that around, right? And looking at self-care as a compliment, right? Like it's something that's going to help you, right, to be able to do these other things. And so sometimes that can reduce the guilt that we have around it, right? And so, yeah, compassion and taking care of yourself, because it's tough. It's rough and it's tough.
It is rough and it is tough. And I'm glad that you said, and I even wrote down the word you said, grace. We need to have not only grace for everyone else out there, just given everything that's happening in the world, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with all of these different factors, but just have grace for ourselves as we navigate all of the issues, all of the stressors that we're dealing with. And as we navigate therapy, especially for those that it's your first time, and this is something that you're trying to learn about or even potentially embracing and starting that journey, give yourself grace, pace it out for yourself, and just take your time, take it slow, do the research until you feel comfortable with the therapist that you may find, with the plan, with the conversations, with the recommendations that they make for you. As you're going down that journey, give yourself that grace, because at the end of it, you may find that you're able to address some of those issues that you have suppressed, or deal with the problems that are right in front of you and you just don't know what to do. So I'll just end it on that and just say, just remember just to have grace. So with that said, I encourage everyone that's in the audience, please use the reactions tab if you're able to, just show your appreciation for our panelists today. They dropped a lot of gems, and you're probably like me, just wrote down a lot of the information that they shared. So just applause and gratefulness to Tracy, to Robert, to Lori, to Courtney, to Bedford. Thank you so much for your time today. We've learned a lot. And like I said earlier, we just scratched the surface on this topic, but I encourage you to continue to do research, especially with the resources that we shared within the chat that you see right now. So definitely click on that and just continue to explore and learn and find what's the best for you and your loved ones. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Arnesia.
Thank you, thank you, thank you again. Thank you to our wonderful host, Sandra, who did a marvelous job of navigating this discussion. And what we want to do now is go ahead and pick our winners. So I am going to share my screen, and can everyone see the wheel? For those of you who are still here, I know there were people who had to leave, so I'm going to call your name if you're still here, or if my team could just assist me. I know Alana's still present, Albert, Clemis, Dominique, Latronda. I don't know that Loti is still here.
Doesn't look like it.
All right, Malik.
No.
And I think Stacy and Jean have gone. And so what I'll do is I will spin the wheel, and we'll have 3 winners out of this. So let's go, let's go, let's go. Alana Brody is a winner with a $25 gift certificate to Amazon. So Alana, if you could put your email address in the chat, that would be great. And we'll go to the next one. I'll spin the wheel again. Dominique, it looks like Dominique Elston has won a $25 gift certificate to Amazon. So if you could put your email in the chat, and we need your email in order to send you the gift card. And last contestant. Come on, come on, come on.
Come on.
Ricardo Graham. If you could put your email in the chat, that will be helpful for us too. Again, we like to say thank you. These are just small tokens of our appreciation for you participating today. Again, thank you to our esteemed panel. You did drop some real gems, a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate you for all that you have done. So I will turn it back over to Sandra and or John, and we'll go from there.
Well, I think everyone has said plenty of thank yous. And again, we want to say thank you on behalf of the board for being here today. And panel, phenomenal job. Thank you. And excuse me, phenomenal job doesn't do justice to what you guys have done, but you guys have shared a lot of information. And again, it's truly appreciated. So with that, I think that's it. We want to, again, wish everyone a happy holiday. We'll be back here in January. Our email is posted. Please email us. This will be recorded and you will, or is being recorded, excuse me, and you will receive a copy of it. So with that, panelists, I think we're going to go to the chat room, Arnicia, just for a few minutes, and board members, and to wrap up for a few minutes, and then that's it. Thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful holiday, a safe holiday, and we will see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.